Hey guys, welcome back once again to another supplementary episode of Me, Myself, and I. This is a little mini series where I talk about the various supplements that I used during the production of the show. So last time we started with the big daddy of them all, which is the Game Master emulator. Went through a little bit about that. Tried to show you, sort of give you sort of like a capsule review of the book, but also give you some sort of pointers on how I used a few things. There was one thing that came up that I realized I kind of left out, and it's kind of an important one, and that is, what is the difference between the results on the fate chart of a yes and an extreme yes, or a no and an extreme no? Well, again, as everything in the emulator, that's kind of up to you, but basically how I interpret it is, if I roll a yes on the fate chart, is there a monster on the other side of the door? And I roll a yes, okay. It's a yes, so we know there's something on the other side of the door, it's some sort of monster. But if I rolled an extreme yes, that means that not only is it yes, but there's something even more to it. So like the old improv, yes and. For those of you who've ever done any improv training. So an extreme yes means yes and something else. So it could be, in the case of I'm going through the undead temple of Thurzan, just to, pick a random example, and the question is there a monster on the other side of the door? And if I roll a yes, then yes. Well, what is it? Well, it's probably going to be undead because we're now in the temple, but it might not be. An extreme yes means, oh yes, there's a monster on the other side of the door, and it's really important, / dangerous, / big, / whatever that you think is sort of the most important aspect of an extreme result on that table. Vice versa, same thing with no. Is there a monster on the other side of that door? No. Okay, we know there's not. Extreme no might mean not only is there not a monster on the other side of the door, but there has never been a monster on the other side of the door. Why? Because the room is actually filled with fire. I don't know, I'm just, whatever. You just make stuff up that's contextually appropriate. So that's just a little addendum to the previous episode about the emulator. Today we are going to... I don't even know you can see that. I hope you can. I hope it's in focus. This is the Perilous Wilds. So this supplement is a supplement for the Dungeon World role-playing game. Dungeon World, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is sort of based on the Powered by the Apocalypse rules, which started with a game called Apocalypse World many years ago. What I was using this supplement for mostly was designing a dungeon. I used this supplement to design the Temple of Thurzan. So how does that work? If I have a look here, here's the table of contents. There's a lot of stuff here that is really specifically for Dungeon World, but you can get a lot of use out of it no matter what your system. This is really cool stuff. Like if you are a Dungeon World person, I strongly recommend this supplement. It's really cool. It really helps to give that old school hex crawl feel to a Dungeon World game. So definitely, if you're a Dungeon World person, check it out. Lots of great examples of many things. Draw the map. This is all cool, naming things. This is really cool stuff as well. Random regions. Anytime you have a supplement where there's random tables, I love it, because that's kind of the heart of what my show is all about, is randomly determining what's going on. So here we have random regions. When you need to create a new region and need inspiration, roll one up. So you roll a region name template, and then each component of that template. So if I roll the D12, it's the other thing I love about this particular supplement. It loves the D12. I think the D12 doesn't get enough love, frankly, so I'm glad to see every time there's a D12 used. So for example, if you rolled an 11, it would be nouns, adjective, terrain, right? So randomly, you might come up with dragon's frozen sound. I picture like a northern fjord, always covered in ice, no matter the time of year. Whatever, right? It's all contextual. Anyway, this is a really cool table. Again, random place. These are just general sort of good things to spur your imagination. These are rules for followers. This is a Dungeon World thing. If you're a Dungeon World person, very useful. See the world, all good hex crawl stuff specific to Dungeon World mostly. But now we get to ask the fates. This is a little like what we were doing with the emulator, right? You make a roll on a table, you interpret it, and you apply the result. It's the same thing as the emulator, except the tables are a little different. You can use them for everything. You can use it for treasure and monsters and dungeons and the whole bit. This is really cool. So this is the discovery table. So this is basically, anytime your characters come up on some sort of discovery, you can randomly determine what that is, right? Is it an unnatural feature, right? Is it a natural feature? Is it evidence of some other thing like a monster or something? Is it a creature? Is it a structure? So let's say you rolled I don't know, a 5. Well, a 5 is evidence. Well, then you roll again, and let's say you rolled a 6, tracks or spoor, and then you rolled a 8. Multiple tracks or spoor. Down here we have age, creatures, responsible. So this table flings you off into other tables to try and flesh out what you've discovered. Again, it's all just random, but it follows a logic of all of its own through these tables. Very, very handy for any GM who's looking for random stuff to populate his world with. And then we go to steadings here as well. Steadings are towns, could be villages, towns, cities, castles, the whole bit. Very useful. And then we have dangers, right? So you've got discoveries or dangers. These are the two things that we came up with in the Temple of Thurzan all the time. We'll get to how that worked, but basically dangers could be unnatural entities or hazards or creatures. And then we have the creatures here. What kind of creature is it? Is it a beast, a human, a humanoid, a monster? And if it is a beast, then we go down here, we determine what kind of beast it is. Is it an airborne beast that kind of looks like a crane? Okay. Is it a humanoid that's like a catfolk? I mean, this can get super gonzo fantasy, which is fine if that's what you're going for. If it's not, then don't roll on those tables, right? You can adjust these tables sort of as you will or ignore results on the table that don't support what you're trying to achieve. All these details, it just allows you to randomly generate virtually every aspect of either a creature or a place or a region or whatever. They're just really good. NPCs, this is really cool too. Just a random NPC. Who is the person that Simon runs into on the road? Well, what's the context? Is it wilderness, rural, or urban? Let's say it's urban. You meet somebody in the town of Hundatora. He rolls an 8 and it's a tradesperson, okay? We go down here. Occupation tradesperson, I roll a 10, and it's an innkeeper. All right, he meets an innkeeper. I guess that means he probably stumbled into an inn. Not necessarily, but depends on the context. Boom, great, so we know who that is. NPC traits, again, lovely D12s. We roll an 8, let's say, which brings us, personality. Well, what's his personality? What's the thing about him that makes him stand out? It's personality, and what about his personality? We'll say it's a 2. Cruel, belligerent bully. You've got this belligerent innkeeper. So Simon walks into this tavern, and the innkeeper's a real jerk. Starts swearing at him for, shut the door, shut the damn door, you're letting all the heat out, or whatever, right? Like you just make it up as you go along. I love this stuff. Free exploration of your imagination. Plumb the depths. This is the big one. This is the chapter I use most of all, especially when talking about the Temple of Thurzan. Every dungeon's going to have a name. Every dungeon's going to have a foundation, which describes who built it and for what purpose. And then a size. Basically, is it roughly small, medium, large, or huge? I think the Temple of Thurzan was technically small. It was not very much. What does that mean? It means that it's going to have a number of themes, and it's going to have an area limit. Themes are things you can actually just make up or the things you can roll on. Themes are kind of what set the dungeon apart from every other dungeon. So what's it all about? Choose or roll. So rot decay was definitely a theme that I think I rolled randomly for, as I rolled everything randomly for the Temple of Thurzan. And the other one was, anyway, whatever the other theme was, that became important because when you're going through your dungeon, the themes could come up. So that just helps you flesh out the dungeon, right? So you determine your size, you determine what your themes are, you determine what your area limit is. Area limit means, okay, well, there's 8 areas or 8 rooms or whatever. Might not necessarily be rooms, but they're explorable areas. And then of those areas, there's common and unique. So common might be things like corridor or T-intersection, or in the Temple of Thurzan, I think a common area was Acolyte's quarters, right? Because there's a chance you could run across those multiple times. And at a temple, it made sense that, there's Acolyte's quarters all over the place. And then there's unique areas. So unique areas were things like the main temple area, the secret temple, or the kitchen. Anyway, the point is that each dungeon area is either going to be common or unique. You just make these up, right? You slot them in however you want, and then you sort of make a little table, right? So if I've got 5 common types of areas, well, then I'll, have it on a table of a D6, and I'll just ignore the 6 if I roll a 6, or whatever. You can do whatever you want. So if you look here, this is an example of a dwarven prison, Corvinhold. Dwarven prison, size is small. Themes, they rolled D12. They got Rotten Decay and Holy War. Common areas, a guard room, gated passage, 3-way intersection, and cell block. So these are areas that you can run into over and over again. The unique areas down here, storeroom, oubliette, treasure chamber, and warden's quarters, these are ones you only run into once, okay? So what that does is whenever you enter a new area, you determine what it is that you come across. And that's where this table comes into right here. So area type and contents. When Simon walked into a new area in that temple, the first thing I did was roll on this table, okay? If I rolled a 7, then okay, well, I know it's a themed area, it's common, and there's a danger. So this table splits it up into unthemed areas and themed areas, and then it splits up into common or unique. And then it tells you what's in the room. So if I rolled 7, that would mean it's a themed area, so that's going to be an area that specifically takes into account one of the 2, typically in this case, dungeon themes, okay? You're keeping track of how many times you run across a themed area because the idea is that once you can no longer come across a themed area, the dungeon is fully explored. Again, you kind of have to sift through these rules a little bit to kind of figure out how that works more specifically, but it does work and it works well. So let's say you rolled a 7. Well, that's themed area, common, and danger. So then I roll onto my common table for the area. So let's say it's an intersection. Great. Okay, we know it's an intersection. It's a themed area, so let's say rotten decay is the theme. So, the idea of rotten decay is prevalent in this common area, which is the intersection. And what is there? There is a danger. And if it is a danger, then we go back to our handy-dandy table here, and we determine what that danger is. Is it an unnatural entity, a hazard, or a creature? Okay? Hazard could be a trap, or like a blinding mist, or a arcane trap. Unnatural entities could be undead, or some sort of demon or whatever, and then it's a creature. You can either use a creature table from your own game system if you're running like D&D or something. There's a bazillion ways to generate random monsters from that, or you could use their random creature here. The point is, that's how it works, okay? So by doing that, by going through and tallying up how many themed areas and how many unique areas that the character has gone through, you eventually can actually draw yourself a little map of what that area looks like. And you also know whether or not you've completely explored the place, because if you can no longer roll any new unique themed areas, then you're basically done, okay? That happened to Simon in one of the later episodes when they went back to the temple. But what happened was they had searched what they thought was everywhere, but they did not find the central temple, which meant, logically, that there had to be a secret door somewhere, because we knew that there was a central temple because of the context of the situation. And we knew that they had explored everything that they could. Therefore, there must be a secret entrance, and that's what ultimately led them to the altar in the main entrance temple there, and they pushed it aside and down they went. So that is basically how that works. And then, you've got lots of different tables to help you determine what the dungeon is, like why was it ruined? Why did they build it? I love that. Lots of random tables, and then a bunch of other things kind of specific to Dungeon World. This is really cool. There's a random name generator, but these are names that you wouldn't often find. So, for example, we have names that are loosely based on Hungarian. That's unusual. You don't see that a lot. Or this one is based loosely on Yoruba, which I think is an African tongue. I could be wrong about that. And then Finnish, and this is where Arn's name came from, Arn Kalapunki. And then we've got Indonesian. So really not very common name styles to draw from. And it's kind of nice if you're populating your world with something other than the sort of the standard, fantasy England vibe. Not that there's anything wrong with it, like I said. But it's just kind of neat if you're looking to do something slightly out of the ordinary. And that is basically it. The Perilous Wilds in a nutshell. So I hope that helps answer some of the questions in terms of how I use this supplement. And if not, sorry. So the next thing we're going to look at is the GM's Miscellany series of books, of which I used, I think, 2 or 3 during the course of the campaign. So we'll have a look at that. We'll have a look at the kinds of things you can use those books for in order to populate your world randomly and take your game to the next level. I don't have any clever slogans or anything to sign out with, so yeah, that's that. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and smash that like button. Blah, blah, blah. And we'll see you next time on Me, Myself, and I. Ciao for now.